the terrorists are holed up in the building, which has signs, Barrick, Kinzel, spelled K-I-E-N-Z-L-E, has the right computer, and the building has a brownish front with a grey concrete side. Several of the shots which show brickwork surrounding windows show the windows of the building in which the terrorists are.
Fox Street, Johannesburg, Monday, the 28th of April, 1975. Security guard turned terrorist David Potter has taken control of the Israeli consulate on the 5th floor of the Hershey building in Fox Street. He has taken 18 hostages and has killed head of security of the consulate, Major Giora Raviv. He has also opened fire on pedestrians in the streets below, wounding scores of people. Police arrive and start to fire back into the building. Due to the misinformation fed to them by Potter, they are under the impression that they are dealing with a terrorist cell. South African Prime Minister John Vorster and his Israeli counterpart has given security forces permission to blow up the building if necessary. They are still unaware that David Potter is the mastermind of the attack. Just after 2 p.m, Potter calls the Carlton Center on his walkie-talkie and reports that some hostages, including himself, have been wounded after the exchange of fire and they need medical attention. To make his point, he forces a female hostage to lean from a window and shout for a doctor. On hearing that hostages have been wounded, Dr. Kalila Soli Gottlieb, a Jewish medical officer, bravely volunteers to go up and treat them. After many attempts, Soli eventually reaches the consulate door, standing face to face with the real terrorist, David Potter. After being satisfied that Soli poses no danger, Potter escorts him to the wounded Evelyn Dakin and Edwin Molopo. Soli tells Potter that he urgently needs medical supplies, and this is relayed to the police, who then gathers up what is needed and sends it up via rope to a consulate window. Soli also attends to Shemi Sur, who is in deep shock. Potter then shows Soli the body of Major Giora Raviv and tells him that neither he nor the wounded are allowed to leave. Potter is scared that Soli would reveal to the police his true identity. He then puts the doctor on the radio to get the police to cease fire. Potter tells him to tell the police that if they don't stop, 2 children will be taken to the window and shot. Meanwhile, Jaap Burger, a junior officer in the SAP, is asked by Colonel Dankie Hubert, Deputy Divisional Commander of the Security Branch, Johannesburg, to go to Fox Street to ascertain what's going on. When he arrives, he sees Colonel Tiens Royres Swanepoel behind the left front door of his official car in the middle of the street in an apparent attempt to block off the street. Burger later recalled that uniformed officers took position on the rooftops of the buildings overlooking the consulate. Every now and then there would be a burst of gunfire from the consulate, answered by return fire from the police. Burger stated that Colonel Swanepoel himself fired on the Hershey building while shouting, "Come out, you bloody cowards! Come and fight like a man!" During the course of the afternoon, various senior officers arrive at the scene, including Division Commander Brigadier W.H. Kortze, Brigadier Gert Prinsloo, Head of Security, as well as Major General Geldenhuys. Also present is the Brigadier General of Israeli Intelligence, who organizes that water and food also be hauled up by rope to the consulate. However, Geldenhuys puts a stop to this when it's decided that a steady flow of supplies could strengthen the resolve of the terrorists. Meanwhile, Commandant Sybrand van der Spey, commander of 2 Reconnaissance Regiment, or 2 Recce, is at his civilian job when he's told of the hostage situation at Fox Street. 2 Recce is an active citizen force unit of the SADF Special Forces and is the same unit Potter wished to join before failing to qualify. This unit is made up of part-time service personnel who undergo Special Forces training but are part of the reserve of the SADF. Sabi immediately phones a brigadier at Witwatersrand Command and requests that he and his men be deployed on the ground. Very little, if anything, had been done by way of training army and police units to deal with matters like building takeovers. However, 2 Recce had trained for such eventualities. Sabi doesn't delay, and while he waits for the brigadier to give him his orders, he phones as many of his men as he can and tells them to report so long to Doornkorp military base to draw Uzi submachine guns, automatic shotguns, light machine guns, ammunition and radios. At 3:30 p.m, the brigadier calls back and asks Sabi how long it will take to get his men equipped and on the ground. The commandant says it will take about 2 hours, but within 90 minutes of the call, 15 members of 2 Recce are already on the ground at Fox Street. Sabi reports to Brigadier Garmeshuizen, commanding officer of Witwatersrand Command, who put Sabi in command of all permanent force soldiers deployed in and around Fox Street. However, as the siege wears on, it becomes apparent that there is chaos within the command structures of the security force elements. Brigadier Garmeshuizen is of the opinion that an armed takeover of a building by terrorists is an army matter. Therefore, he assumes that he is in complete command. However, Geldenhuys felt that because it was a domestic issue, it should be an SAP affair, and therefore he should be in command. This confusion of command and jurisdiction carries on throughout the entire afternoon, until the debate is finally resolved when Foster's friend and founder of the infamous boss, General Lang Hendrik van den Berg, is placed in full command by Foster himself. It's not long before the press also take note of the unfolding drama. During the course of the afternoon, journalists arrive to cover this story. One of them is a young Oggendblad newspaper journalist, De Wet Potgieter. He remembers well how Colonel Swanepoel realized there and then that the police urgently needed a special task force to deal with situations like this. Also on the ground is rookie television reporter Cliff Saunders. Television has not yet arrived in South Africa, but this very visual news story is just too great of an opportunity to ignore. Cliff later recounted what he saw when he arrived on the scene. Bullets flying, police dogs chasing us, cops firing wildly at the Hershey building whenever they see the camera pointing at them. In contrast to the policemen, Sabi and his men move covertly and occupy the buildings in the vicinity, where they set up 12 machine gun nests, covering all aspects of the consulate. The 2 Recce men are very aware and fearful, not of the terrorists, but of their police counterparts. The soldiers and policemen don't have compatible radio communications, so they are particularly vulnerable to friendly fire. As a result, the most difficult part for the men of 2 Recce is clearing the Hershey building. The men crawl across the roof and make quick darts up fire escapes to avoid being shot at by the policemen across the street. The men position themselves and wait for orders. Everyone, including senior officers from both South Africa and Israel, are still under the impression that they are facing a heavily armed gang of Red Army terrorists. However, facts on the ground are starting to paint a different picture. Burger is walking on the street below the consulate, scouring for evidence, when he picks up 9mm bullet casings. He takes a closer look at these casings and realizes that they have the Star of David engraved on the back of them. He asks the Israeli brigadier present who of his men are participating in the firefight. The brigadier angrily denies any Israeli participation. A short while later, Burger notices a young man walking up and down in the street with a walkie-talkie in his hand, while occasionally looking up towards the consulate. He notifies Colonel Hubert of the suspicious young man. Hubert orders Burger to take the man to John Foster Square police station and interrogate him. Burger complies. Once at the police station, he discovers that the young man is none other than Charles Protter. Charles informs Burger that he has been receiving orders from his brother David from within the consulate. When questioned whether any terrorists are in the consulate, Protter answers that there are no foreign persons inside the consulate. He also tells Burger that he presumes that the person responsible for all the shooting is his brother, David Protter. Burger then returns to Fox Street and briefs Hubert on this newly acquired information. Burger also passes this information to Geldenhuys, who orders that Charles be brought to him immediately so that he could interrogate him himself. Between 7 and 8 p.m., Israeli Ambassador Dr. Una and South African Minister of Justice Jimmy Kruger arrive at the scene from Cape Town. By this time, General van der Berg has also arrived with direct orders from Foster to assume complete command of the situation. Van der Berg immediately takes over the hardware store right below the consulate and converts it into an operations room. He then organizes radio communications with the consulate and starts with negotiations. Meanwhile, inside the consulate, Solly continues to try and persuade Protter to release some of the hostages. He promises that if Protter did so, no one will reveal it was him or that he was alone. Solly said afterwards, "My whole worry was that the police would enter and there would be a lot of casualties." Finally, Protter agrees to release the doctor and the wounded on condition that food be sent up again. Van der Berg agrees and 3 stretchers are left on the 5th floor at about 10:30 p.m. The wounded Dakin and Malopo, as well as Major Gioro Raviv's body, are placed on the stretchers. Solly, accompanied by Shemitsu, exit the consulate as well. Astonishingly, none of the released hostages tell the police what was really going on inside the consulate. Presumably, they do not reveal anything because they had promised not to do so. By 1 a.m. on Tuesday, 29th of April, the situation is relatively quiet. Then, suddenly, the night is disturbed by a burst of light machine gun fire as bullets pepper a 2-recce machine gun nest. Sabi immediately runs out into the street and opens fire with his pump-action shotgun in the general direction of the consulate just to keep the terrorists' heads down. His men mistake this to be the signal to open fire, and this causes everyone else to open fire. When the firing dies down, the panicked voice of one of the hostages, Gadi Dror, comes over the radio demanding doctors immediately. He's asked who has been injured, but Dror replies that he is not allowed to disclose any information. Solly, who is still in the operations room, asks Dror over the radio what had happened. Dror tells him that 5 hostages have been shot, some very badly. Stretchers are once again sent up and a badly wounded man is evacuated. Protter then complains through Dror that there are policemen on the roof of the Hershey building, and he demands that they be withdrawn or there will be more shooting. Van der Berg responds by firmly stating that he will not withdraw one man. The policemen Protter is complaining about are in fact men belonging to a section of 2-recce. Meanwhile, Burger and Major Skalk Visser go to the hospital to talk to the 2 wounded hostages. The lady, Evelyn Dakin, insists on not saying anything because she fears that he is going to kill them. This immediately indicates to both Burger and Visser that there might indeed be only one gunman. They go over to Edwin Malopo and ask him how many terrorists there are in the building. Malopo looks up at them with surprise and says, "No sir, there are no terrorists in the building. The police are shooting at us, but we don't know why. The only armed person in the building is Mr. Protter, the security guard, He is protecting us from the police. Burger and Visser then return to the scene and report to Van der Berg that they deduce with fair certainty that the terrorist gang is actually David Protter. According to Burger, Dr. Una was extremely upset upon hearing this and dismissed it. However, Van der Berg takes this revelation seriously. He stares at Burger and Visser for a while before taking the radio into his hand and calmly saying, "Come on, David, we know it's you. Talk to me." After a long silence, Protter replies, "Okay, General, I knew that when I let those people free, you're going to find out the truth." Protter and Van der Berg then continue negotiations throughout the night, with Protter making several demands. He initially requests that Dr. Una stand in the middle of the street so that he could identify him before speaking to him. Van der Berg denies this request. Protter then demands transport to the airport, as well as an aircraft be arranged for a flight out of the country. This is also refused. Other demands are also made, but Van der Berg refuses each and every one of them. At around 5:30 a.m. on the 29th of April 1975, David Protter calls over the radio telling Van der Berg that he wants to surrender. However, he demands that all police snipers move out of the area first. This is one demand that Van der Berg agrees to, but also not completely. Everyone in the operations room fears that Protter might come out firing or strapped with grenades ready to suicide himself and kill some of the hostages in the process. Therefore, Van der Berg orders Sabi's men to be ready to take Protter out. Sabi and 5 of his sharpshooters crouch in the shop window, their weapons trained on the entrance of the Hershey building. Protter first releases some of the hostages before taking the remainder down the elevator and onto the ground floor. He makes sure that he is surrounded by hostages, making it difficult for Sabi and his men to get a bead on him. But once Protter and the hostages are in the open, Colonel Swanepoel grabs Protter and searches him before placing him under arrest. Protter is then unceremoniously bundled into a police vehicle and driven off to John Foster Square. Just like that, the Fox Street siege is over. After 21 hours, one person is dead and at least 45 people are wounded. However, various newspapers gave conflicting reports, with some reporting that 4 people had been killed, 2 hostages and 2 passers-by during Protter's attack on the pedestrians below. One newspaper put the number of injured as high as 82, but none of these claims could be verified. An interesting aside is that the footage captured by Cliff Saunders and his SABC television crew would become the first ever news bulletin to be screened on television in South Africa. At the time of the siege, the SABC did not have a television service yet. This would only happen officially on the 5th of January 1976. But it was decided that the footage be aired on the 5th of May 1975, the day that the SABC introduced test transmissions. For the South African security forces, the siege was an uncomfortably close call. It exposed huge gaps in their capabilities of handling similar situations. It also highlighted the importance of having a protocol in place in scenarios which involve close cooperation between the military and the police. Indeed, the protocols developed in the wake of Fox Street are still in place to this day, most notably that the SAP have command and the military are used as support in domestic situations. But the siege also helped the SAP and government officials realize that an elite anti-terrorist police unit was urgently needed. Although this necessity had already been identified during the early 1970s, the Fox Street siege sped up the bureaucracy somewhat. On the 1st of February 1976, less than 10 months after the siege, the South African Police Special Task Force was established. Charles Potter was also arrested and was later convicted of kidnapping 18 people, as well as of arms and ammunition offences. According to Peter Stiff, author of The Silent War, the judge found Charles to be immature and gullible and under his brother's influence. The court sentenced him to 5 years imprisonment, half of which was conditionally suspended. As for David Potter, he maintained that he was under instructions from the Israeli government to run a security drill, but this was rejected by the court. He was ultimately found to be a clinically certifiable psychopath and was found guilty of murdering Major Giora Raviv, of 45 counts of assault with intent to murder, of kidnapping 18 people, as well as of 3 offences under the firearms and ammunition laws. However, the court found Potter to have diminished responsibility because of his mental condition, and he was sentenced to a total of 59 years imprisonment. Some sentences were ordered to run concurrently, so ultimately it was expected that he would serve an effective prison term of 25 years. In July 1991, he was pardoned as part of then-President F.W. de Klerk's remission for first-time offenders. Once released, Potter went about trying to eke out a living by, ironically, establishing various security companies. He finally settled in Sanin, where he established a security company called Rescue 911. He became a recognizable person in the Limpopo town, riding around on a modified BMW 1200cc touring bike, kitted out with an emergency light mounted on the back and armed with various weapons ranging from firearms to knives. Today, he runs a crisis center that serves as a safe haven for women who are victims of gender-based violence. From all accounts, Potter is considered to be an upstanding citizen within the community due to his lightning-quick response to an emergency, much faster than the responses by the local police. In an area where farmers especially are vulnerable to attack, Potter's dedication is widely celebrated. While Potter's service to his adopted community should be commended, it should be equally remembered that he has been certified a clinical psychopath by the court. This should not be taken lightly. Potter also recently popped up on at least one Facebook group that tracks and outs people who pretend to be ex-SADF soldiers or recce operators, also known as stolen valor, where he is seen wearing battle fatigues and insignia of elite units. For members of these elite units, as well as other servicemen who have actually served the country, seeing someone with a history such as Potter's wear their unit's insignia is not only an insult to them, but an insult to their fallen comrades. Potter's intentions towards his community may be good, and it probably is. He has been able to live out his fantasies as a lone wolf hero within the parameters of the law, and has done good deeds as a result. This should not be ignored, but in the same breath, his part in the most outrageous hostage crisis in South African history should also never be ignored. David Potter's name should forever be synonymous with the Fox Street siege, because to forget might be construed as forgiving. But that is not for us to do. To forgive or not to forgive is up to his victims and their families. All we can do is remember. That's it for now. Until next time, stay stashy.